Hi, everyone, and thank you for coming to the Markeisha Hall podcast. I'm your host, Markeisha Hall. I'm an IEP coach, parent empowerment partner, and certified autism travel professional. And today we have a very special guest with us, Ellie. I'm going to let her introduce herself, and then we're just going to get into why we're here today.
Yeah, Markeisha, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to talk today. As you said, I'm Ellie Sanazaro. I live in St. Louis, Missouri with my 3 kiddos. I have 2 daughters. Rosalie is 4.5. Leonie is almost 3. And my son, Finn, who came to our family with the help of the National Down Syndrome Adoption Network, is 18 months old. So they keep me pretty busy. Very busy. And in addition to staying home with them full time, over the past year, I have written and published a children's book, which we'll talk about a little bit later, I'm sure. But that's kind of the most basic info about me.
So would you say the book is your pandemic baby? Is that what it's called?
Yes, I did call it. I did call it my pandemic baby because it was like, I actually wrote the words for it at the very end of February while my son Finn was in the hospital, and didn't know. I mean, there was like talk of a pandemic over in China, but didn't really know whether or not it was going to end up in America. And so very shortly after, things shut down, and that's when I really started work on the book. And so basically during most of 2020, that's what I was working on, just as we were at home and quarantining and all that good stuff.
I also want to, we found out that we had in common that we both had adopted, which we didn't know. I think we were just following each other for different reasons. We're like, oh, you adopted also. I adopted also. And you mentioned the network. What was it?
So we adopted through the National Down Syndrome Adoption Network.
Okay. I'm going to have to, that's awesome.
Yeah, they're an organization. They might do a little bit like with Canada, but primarily they just work in the United States. And basically, they advocate for children who are available to be adopted through foster care who have Down syndrome throughout the United States. And then they also, if a mother finds out that she's expecting a baby and she gets a prenatal diagnosis of Down syndrome, or if she's just had a baby and gets a birth diagnosis of Down syndrome and decides that she wants to make an adoption plan, typically she'll reach out to the National Down Syndrome Adoption Network. They come right up when you Google Down syndrome adoption, which is how we found them. And yeah, they're able to place babies and children with families who will, love and cherish those kiddos.
I love that so much. It is, and if you guys have a heart or you just didn't even know that was a thing, or you haven't thought about fostering or to adopt, I am a proponent, of course, because that's how we got our 4th baby. Well, he's a big boy now. He doesn't want me to have a baby anymore. He's 6.
No.
So he's almost 7. And when he turns 7, he said he gets to not wear his shirt like his older brothers. So it put in my place that he's officially not a baby anymore. But
my goodness,
definitely kiddos out there that could be waiting to be in your home.
Definitely.
You should have a whole separate one about adoption.
Yes.
That's how I found your account, because Mr. Fincredible is the baby. Mr. Finney.
Yes, Mr. Finney.
Yes. I was like, who is this little munchkin with this cuteness? So, I feel like I've watched him grow up during the pandemic.
I know. It's like he really has grown up over the past year so much.
He's done so many things, and his sisters are so great with him. So I could talk about the babies all day long. I want to talk about your book. And the premise of it. How did you come up with the idea for it? Where did this start? And tell us about Image Bearer.
Yeah, so the book is called Image Bearer, and it's a children's book for young children, and it's really designed to help families at home talk to their kids and introduce their kids to various disabilities and visible differences, and it
Yeah.
does that through a biblical lens. So it is a
Mhm.
book that everything it talks about is through that lens of, a biblical worldview. So I didn't really ever plan to write this book. But as I said earlier, one night I was in the hospital with Finn. We'd been in the ICU for several weeks. We didn't really see any end in sight. He was not able to breathe without support. He was not able to eat safely.
Mhm.
And so just didn't really see any way we were going to be able to go home. I was separated from my husband and the girls and just feeling really down. It was really hard time. And one night I just was feeling really discouraged and just feeling like, just very aware of the fact that the world did not value Finn's life as much as I valued it and as much as God values it.
Mhm.
I knew that the world and just other people would look at him and think, well, I'd even heard, or seen people make comments that, because he had Down syndrome, that he was a burden on society, or, because he was in the hospital, he was a burden on society. And so just felt so aware of that reality. And
Mhm.
I felt like in that just time of discouragement, God really met me and reminded me of Genesis 1:27, which says that God made man and woman in his image. And I just felt like that's how we know. Like, that's how I know that Finn's life is just as valuable as anyone else's. Like, he
Right.
can't eat right now, he can't breathe on his own right now, but he is made in the image of God, and that means that he has so much value, so
Yes.
much worth. And I just felt like, man, why wasn't I taught this when I was in Sunday school? Like, how come we
Right.
never talked about disabilities?
Right.
Even growing up, every once in a while it would come up, but I didn't really know anyone who had a disability when I was a kid, didn't have any family members with disabilities. And so, it's just not something I knew a whole lot about. And I just felt in that moment like I want kids to know about Finn, and I want kids to know that his life is important and he's valuable to God. And so, just inspired by that verse, I wrote down kind of like a poem because the book
Yeah.
does rhyme.
Mhm.
And just felt like, man, is this something that I could actually do? Like, could I actually create this resource? So I sent it to like some family members and some friends and just said, like, hey, what do you think about this? And the feedback, people were really excited about it. And so I was like, all right, let's see what we can do. And so I got connected with an illustrator, and just over the course of a year, it was almost exactly a year from the time I wrote it to when the books were delivered to my hometown, that the book it became a physical book. So that's kind of the backstory of it.
That is so amazing, to take a thought that you had, an idea, and to see a physical manifestation of it as a whole book.
Yeah, it
And
was
what I really love
exciting.
about the book and the website, not the web, oh well, yes, the website and really the Instagram page is that it's disabilities that aren't just the ones that people typically see. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
that we're talking about different feeding differences and limb
Mm-hmm.
differences. And to me, I was saying earlier that that's beautiful to see because those are some of the students that I used to teach in my setting.
Yeah.
And that you see them smiling, and there's family and friends and siblings and different activities that they love to do. And I think that that is what I feel is so beautiful because, as you know, raising a child with a disability is that it's not only that, right? There's moments that they have with their
Yeah.
siblings. There's moments that they're just being a 18-month-old or a
Mm-hmm.
6-year-old, and you're just like, did you just, did you just fall down on the floor? It's times that
Yeah.
they're first of all, they are just kids,
Right.
but in everything, I feel like some families that are not raising a child or not have one in their family that they just think that that's just all the focus all the
Yeah.
time. Sometimes it's just funny stuff. Sometimes it's
Yes.
just kid stuff or just parent stuff, and you have to give them the mom look or and things like that, right?
Yeah. It's so
So I
true.
love that.
They're just kids. And so You mentioned like showing feeding tubes and some of the disabilities that we don't typically see. That was one of the things that was really important to me when writing the book, because honestly, until we started like pursuing Down syndrome adoption and really researching Down syndrome and everything that can come with it, I didn't know about feeding tubes. Like, I had never known anyone who had a feeding tube. And so I thought that, the only people who had feeding tubes were in hospitals, maybe on life support, that type of thing. I didn't realize that there were just people walking around with feeding tubes. And so I thought, man, if I didn't even know about this as, a 20-something-year-old woman, surely there's other people out there who don't realize or don't know anything about feeding tubes, and how are they going to teach their kids? Like, how are they going to introduce their kids to that type of a difference? And so, the only way the kids are going to know is if their parents know. And how can we create a resource that will equip parents to be able to introduce those types of things to their kids? And so it was really important to me to be able to, in the book, represent as many different types of like diagnoses and differences as I could reasonably fit into the book. And then also lots of different equipment that kids use, because up until I wrote the book, I'd never seen a book that had a kid with a feeding tube in it. So Finn had a feeding tube, actually. And so that was really important for me to have that in the book.
I mean, I keep on saying it. I wish I had other words than I love it, but I do love it. I think that a lot of families, including myself, and I know that you refer to that also. I didn't know prior to being a special education teacher about these kiddos, and I just didn't know. I mean, my heart was like, okay, I just didn't know. I want to believe that the more books there are like yours, and the more conversations that we have, and the more families that are comfortable sharing those types of things, that there will be more people like ourselves who was like, oh, I just didn't know. Now I know. What can we do? How can we be more inclusive in our communities and at our schools? And how can we bring those families in so they're not feeling alone or left out? Or it also gives you a talking point. I don't know if you've run across this, but some people just don't know the questions to ask, or who should ask, or should I ask?
Yeah.
I did a post about that, but that happens a lot to me also in my DMs. Like, how did you feel? Like, how did you know he was going to talk? Because he was not non-speaking until he was 4.5. So he hasn't been talking that long. Now he's taking our ears off. But it wasn't out of a mean place. Some people are being out of mean-spirited place, but some people just don't know how to approach it and how to seem interested in what's going on and how to best communicate that. So this is a great tool to be able to utilize and open up that conversation.
Yeah. I really encourage families to like start at home. Like, that was the post I think you were talking about, is have these conversations at home when you're in like the safe space your kids are familiar with, using children's books. It doesn't have to be Image Bearer. It can be, there's tons out there, but using children's books makes it such a non-threatening way to bring this topic up to your kids. And the reason I think it's so important is, my family was at the park a couple weekends ago. It was a nice day, and there were several people out at the park. And on the same day, the same time, we met a girl who had Down syndrome, a boy who had autism, and another girl who had dwarfism. And so, your kids, it's not a matter of will they ever meet someone who, has a visible difference? It's like, no, it's not if, it's when, it's going to happen. And if we don't prepare our kids for that encounter, they are, either going to be really shy or scared and not feel safe or comfortable going up and initiating friendship with that child who has a visible difference. Or I kind of have one of each. Like Rosalie, I think her natural demeanor is she would be a little bit more like standoffish and kind of observe. And my Leonie, my middle kid, I call her a loud observer. Like she'll just make a really loud comment that, is like embarrassing to us as parents, but it comes from such an innocent place. Like she's trying to figure out her world. And so if she sees someone that looks different than her, she's going to make a comment or ask a really loud question about it. And, you kind of can avoid those scenarios, or at least prepare your kids for those scenarios by having these conversations at home. And so that's, another goal of Image Bear is just giving parents a tool, because it has little, comments in the footnotes like, Ivy's using a G tube. That's a feeding tube that brings food directly to her stomach, because, I know there's parents out there who they don't know what a feeding tube is. They don't know what a trach is or an AAC device is. And so I tried to make the book not just like to help kids learn, but also to help the parents learn, because they have to know kind of the basics to have these conversations.
Right. I am saying I love it again, but I do. Because it is so true. And I like that you do give those footnotes so that they don't have to like Google and be like, well, what is this?
Mm-hmm.
What are they talking about? What is the picture of? So they'll be able to reference it right there and be able to start those conversations at home and be able to take it into the community, because I'm seeing more from when I was in the classroom, and definitely from when I was younger. I'm still, I'm 27 now. Just more inclusion, more families feeling comfortable being out and about in the community.
Yeah.
And so we want to give them the words and the words, things to say. So it's not as like, what is that? Even though I would feel fine saying like, what is that? But a lot of families, I remember when I was in the classroom that they are like, we don't go out because we don't want to deal with the staring or the questions or the like sad look. And so like giving other people a way to comment. And I always say they're a child first. So that's the first question. Like, well, my cousin or whoever in my DMs, I'm sure you get that too. They have a child that just got diagnosed with autism. What should I say to them? What should I do? And I was like, what would you have done before? Do that same thing. Like they want to talk to you about their child and the new things that they are doing, right? As opposed to always, because they are a kid. There's some things that they're going to have need assistance with, but there's things that they do that they just want to tell somebody, you know what, the other day, Josiah was in the backyard just pulling the grass and squirreling in his hand. We had just planted that grass and now there's a patch, in the grass, everything's just, some things are just like, you know what, this is what he did today. It had nothing to do with his autism. It just had to do with him exploring sometimes or not liking the food. Like we don't always like everything, or not wanting to say anything to anybody, not just because he couldn't, he just didn't feel like it. Some of those things are just great to start conversations with, just within family members too. Because I don't definitely ran into that with some of the families that you probably are in contact with now, that their own family members, not just, we're talking about the communities, but when you're talking about starting at home, there's family members that have their own misconceptions about different diagnoses, and just giving them the tools to be able to do that.
Yeah. I mean, I think definitely what you said about like every kid is just a kid first. I just think about like as a parent, what makes me feel so loved is when I see people who love my kids and take interest in my kids and, want to play with my kids and that kind of thing. And so it's the same with, our kids who have different diagnoses or disabilities. We just want people to like love them and take interest in them. And I know, for us, we definitely had to like kind of teach our family about, like, I keep going back to Finn's G tube, but that was kind of the big thing, is he had this feeding tube. And so to tell our families, like, it's not going to fall out. It's not
Mhm.
going to leak on you, because I don't blame them. He had this feeding tube that was a direct line to his stomach. And, they might have felt scared, like, can I
Right.
pick him up? Am I going to hurt him? And,
Mhm.
it doesn't come from a bad place. It just comes
Right.
from unfamiliarity, not wanting to do the wrong thing. I think that's
Right.
how most people are, is
Yeah.
they don't want to do the wrong thing. And so,
Right.
we definitely had to just take the time to be like, hey, this is how it works. It's not going to fall out. It's
Right.
not going to get on you. Like, it stays closed, all that kind of thing. And so, yeah, I mean, it's the same thing. You have to have those conversations with your family. It's just like
Yeah.
you do, with your kids and everything else.
Right. I know that's a very big deal for a lot of, no, I don't want to say first time parents, but a lot of parents have those questions like, what do I say to my best friend? And, or,
Mm-hmm.
we're going to a play date, and, you know, my kid's not going to be able to eat the snacks because
Mm-hmm.
they have the G tube. So they're not even going
Right.
to be able to participate in that type of thing. And I don't want to be feeling left out or have to explain, and what should I do? So
Yeah.
I
And
think that's important.
our family's been so great, because like on Easter, or if there's an occasion where they'd be getting a treat for all the other kids in my family or the cousins,
Mhm.
my sister-in-law or my mother-in-law have said, like, hey, I know Finn can't have a Rice Krispie treat. What could he have? Could he eat
Right.
this? Could he eat that? And so, they just go out of their way to try to make him feel included. He's
Right.
not really aware, he wouldn't
Mhm.
realize that, he didn't get a snack, but I really, as a parent, you
Yeah,
appreciate people thinking of your kid. And,
absolutely.
um, yeah. And I was thinking back to what you said about people feeling more comfortable, like, coming out. Whereas, when I was growing up, I don't really remember meeting that many kids with disabilities,
Mhm.
like on the playground or even at church or school. At school, they
Right.
were always in a separate classroom.
Yeah.
But I think, like, with some of the changes in schools becoming more inclusive, some churches becoming more inclusive, but then I think, like, social media is a big part
Yeah.
of people feeling more comfortable coming out, because I feel like that has been such a powerful tool to raise awareness. And so I've encouraged parents too, like, hey, if your kids, read a children's book and they're introduced to a feeding tube and they want to learn more about it, you can go into Instagram and follow kids who have feeding tubes and
Right.
watch their stories. And then your kids get that extra reinforcement of, like, oh, these
Right.
really are just regular kids. Like,
Yeah.
this, they're playing in their backyard just like I
Okay.
play in my
They doing
backyard. Or
TikTok
yeah,
dances,
like,
and
I feel like seeing a real kid and, getting to watch just kind of their everyday life
right.
makes it even less, unfamiliar to our kids. It just gives
Right.
them more comfort. And so I do think social media is another really great tool for, introducing our kids to these differences, and as adults learning about these differences as well.
Yes. And I think that just what do I want to say? Being more inclusive, social media allows families, other adults, to see, like, what can I do? That's the question I always pose to people. If you don't have a child that has, I was about to say have IEP. Uh, that's always in my mind. If you don't
Yes.
have a child that has a disability, then this is also your responsibility. If you believe that the world should be, and our community should be more inclusive,
Mm-hmm.
because it can't just be me and you. Of course, we're like, we have our sons, we have
Yeah.
they have siblings. We want everyone to behave appropriately, so we don't have to
Mhm.
go mama bear on them. No, so they don't, say anything inappropriate. We want them to be loved, because they have so many wonderful, like, characteristics, and they're just
Mhm.
fun kiddos.
Yeah.
We want, like, everyone to see that, like, you don't have to be afraid of Down syndrome. You don't have to be afraid of autism,
Mhm.
um, and other differences. So I think that that is important for families that feel comfortable to say, these are the things that you can do in your community and in
Mhm.
your church and in your school, to help,
Yeah.
right? Like, you aren't seeing these things. I didn't think to ask those questions when I was going to school.
Yeah.
I didn't start in special education until 2008. I had been a general education teacher before that. And I was just like, why did nobody tell me? Like, I could
Mhm.
have been on this gravy. I could have been on this train,
Yeah.
and change things around before that. I just didn't know. And I think being in separate classrooms.
Mm-hmm.
And at church, lots of churches, it's difficult if they don't have the proper maybe sensory rooms or the proper
Mm-hmm.
teachers to take care of those types of things. And then parents don't feel comfortable going or can't go
Yeah.
because they don't have those types of services available. And it's just the same thing that we're talking about. We just, you don't see them. So
Yeah.
you can't interact with them or even be like, well, what is this? And, oh, I want my kid to be friends. We like the same things. Me and Ellie, we both like Starbucks, and we're going to bring all our kids and we're going to go to the park and all have Starbucks together. You can't make those
Yeah.
connections if they're in a classroom or they're in a separate part of the church or a separate part of the school or a separate part of the community. They have their own sports teams and things like that.
Right.
We're going to be having the same thing, the same conversation that we're having now. Like we just didn't see it.
Yeah.
So that's awesome that you did your book to to at least have it represented
Yeah.
in a different way.
And with what you said, I feel like I would encourage parents because I know I am the type of person who I don't want to offend anyone. And so if there's a risk of offending someone, I probably just won't do it. And so I know for me, if there was a child in my daughter's class who used a wheelchair, I might be nervous to ask, like, hey, do you want to come over for a play date? Because we have steps in our house, like our house isn't wheelchair accessible. And so then maybe I just wouldn't ask. And so I would encourage parents, like, don't worry about those details. Like those parents and that child are used to living in a world, though they shouldn't have to be. They're used to living in a world that where not every place is accessible to them. So they know how to make it work. And if they can't come to your house, they'll say, oh, what if we met up at a playground? Or what if we met up at, the zoo or, some other place? And so don't not ask. Don't not initiate because you're worried about offending. I think those families always appreciate the invitation. And, if there are children who are in your child's classroom, but maybe they spend most of the time in a separate room. If you're inviting your whole kids, their entire class to a birthday party, like extend an invitation to that child too. Maybe they won't be able to come. Maybe their parent won't feel comfortable with that, but maybe they'll be able to. And that's a point of connection that they wouldn't otherwise have, but that also your children wouldn't have had otherwise. And I think it's important for all parents to realize, like, yes, it's important for our kids with disabilities to be included, but it's also important for kids who don't have a disability and who don't have siblings with disabilities to be around kids with disabilities. Like it's not a one-way thing. Like it benefits everybody when we have inclusion. And so I would just encourage parents, like, don't be worried about offending. Just extend the invitation. Just ask, and it will always be appreciated.
Yes, birthday parties was a big deal. Lots of tears when talking to parents. That's a big deal. Just kids not being invited to birthday parties. So I'm sure they would be able to figure it out, or even just the invite. It might not be able to happen. I had a medically fragile student who, because he was medically fragile, there was not going to birthday parties or couldn't have any home. That's why he was at home, getting taught at home. But we still invited him to the stuff, and we show him, like, this is the birthday parties, and these are the things that we're doing in the classroom. And we're really good friends with their family today, and they just still like appreciated it. Because like we kept it, we showed him, we talked to him about it, and put him in the pictures and things like that. That is important. Just even the invite, even if they have the parents decide if that's something that they can or can't do, but not having that as a parent, you're like, my baby's never going to be invited to, possibly never be invited to a birthday party.
That's so hard.
That's so hard.
It's really hard. And I feel like now with Zoom, like if you had a kid who would want to attend but is medically fragile, can't be around other kids, like I feel like now technology has opened up a lot of ways to happen.
I never thought about that.
I don't know.
Real about that. or you can do a reel about it.
You can do it.
That's a good idea. I didn't even think about that. We didn't have that back in the day.
I know, but I feel like, this pandemic has obviously been negative in many, many, many ways, but I feel like that has opened a lot of opportunities for, you know, families who do have a child who, you know, maybe they're immunocompromised or, you know, just
Yes.
can't physically be there. Yeah, you should make a reel about it. I think
I'm
people
gonna
would
make a
like to
reel
learn
about
about
that. I didn't even think about
it.
that. It just always chokes me up. I don't know, whenever I talk about birthday parties and I'd be like, oh, because I know friends
Yeah.
that have happened to, and they have said like our kids' birthday parties are the only birthday parties that their kids have gotten
Mm,
invited to.
yeah.
And we have really good birthday parties, so they're not missing out on much because they're pretty
Yeah.
epic. But I'm like, that
It
would
shouldn't be that way.
get
Yeah.
right. It's just like some of the simple joys of parenthood that I definitely didn't realize I was taking for granted. But once we adopted Josiah, I I get a little choked up. I just didn't know. It just is different. My thoughts of what friendships and things like that would look like for him, especially when he wasn't speaking, because it was difficult for him to communicate,
Yeah.
and how would that look? What would that look like at school? And I feel like I have a good background, right, to
Yeah.
figure those things out. But my mommy heart was like, I don't. How is?
Yeah. It's so different being on the mom side versus the professional side. It's just
Yes.
like, yeah, it's a really different
Yeah.
experience.
What if somebody, you know,
Yeah.
all those thoughts, even though we can prepare, of course, and do those things, then he has, really tall siblings. So nobody even thinks about mistreating Josiah. Um, it still like just runs through my head like all a lot
Yeah.
more than it probably should. And we have a great support system too, but they are still like that thought, like, well, is he going to be able to like invite him? Who's going to be inviting him to a birthday party?
Yeah.
Those are like little things. Like, is he going to have his own little group of friends and things like that? So this is always so close to my heart. I feel like I'm starting all over again. Well, I am, because he's only in kindergarten.
Right.
With this whole, play dates and birthday parties and
Yeah.
sports teams and all that stuff. So yes, ask. There's a kid and there's a family that's at your kid's school that is sounding just like me,
Yeah.
just like you, waiting for, a chance to just participate in something that we all have taken for granted before, such as a birthday party or a play
Yeah.
date.
Yeah.
Or just, mommy, let's go grab a Starbucks and hang out at the park for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I've told parents like because I've had people ask me like how do we how do we make our church more accessible or how do we do inclusion? And I think obviously the invitation is the first thing, but then, just like making it as easy as possible for the
Mhm.
other parent, like just realizing like to get out the door with kids is hard anyway, but when
Yeah.
you have a kid who you need to bring oxygen and a feeding tube and a feeding pump and you
Mhm.
got to bring all these extra things, or maybe a child who has, sensory sensitivities, and it's hard to get them dressed and to get their shoes on and just get them out the door and in their car seat. Like just being really empathetic and aware, like it's hard to get out the door with kids. It's harder to get out the door with kids who have special needs. And so do anything you can to make it as easy as possible. Like if you're at church and have someone who's uses a wheelchair and it's hard to get it all out of the car, like can you have someone just go park their van? Can they pull their car up right in front of church and have someone park the van? Like remove any obstacle you can, because it's already hard just to get there to begin with.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes, yes, yes. I know this isn't supposed to be about me. Sorry, podcast people out there. Yes, yes, it is. The time constraints. You'd be like, we have to get out. Services at this time, and that was just be like, we're just not gonna go. We're just not gonna go to, because we can't find his shoe. He's having a meltdown. It's gonna be too much. That is a real good point that you brought up when churches and making it as easy as possible, because it is difficult to get out the door, just having 3 kids, and you have 3 under, you said 4, 3, and 18 months.
Yeah. We just barely missed the whole 3 under 3 thing. We were like 11 days late.
Ours were, well, we have 17, 15, and 12. So I remember the day there was 3 under 5 at one point, and then we have Joe. So it gets easier now that they're so much older than Josiah now. Then it's like, oh, we can have 5 more of these. And I was like, absolutely not. It's going to be the parents that are like, is that your grandma? No, that's my mom. Because he's only 6. And we're 45. Okay. So I like the points that you're bringing up. I didn't think about the obstacles of getting to a church service.
Yeah.
If you have all the medical equipment that you have, or if you have a wheelchair, or I do know about the sensory needs, but I never thought about really addressing how to make that easier to get to the places.
Yeah. Well, I didn't ever think of it. So shortly before Finn was born, we actually started a special needs ministry at my church, with like buddies who could be a buddy in the class. And we had like a sensory room and stuff. And so in my mind, I was not yet like a special needs parent. I didn't have firsthand experience. My thought was like, how can we make it as easy as possible for people when they're at church, which is important. Like, how can we make it so that their kids can be in the classroom and parents can stay in the service? What support can we give? But it wasn't until I had Finn and he had feeding tubes and, just oxygen and all this extra stuff that I realized like, oh, like half the battle is just getting there to begin with, And so I just think it's something that you just don't realize it until you're in that situation.
Right. My brain is spinning with ideas. Like that just opened up a whole new, like just getting there is half the battle.
Yeah.
As they say, just getting there is half the battle. Yeah. I'm going to have to be pondering that with our church too. Bring that up to them. I'm making a note to myself to bring that up to our church. We do have a special needs ministry at our church also, but never thought about getting there.
Yeah.
Just getting there.
Yeah. I mean, I hadn't either until it was hard to get to church.
It was hard to get to church.
Yeah.
Oh, good. This has been such a great conversation. I'm sure I could go on and on and on. I think we'll have you back to talk about adoption and how that, how people can maybe get involved in those different organizations, or how can we be more involved in that? I'm very tied to that community too, because it's, I'm sure but kiddos that have special needs are at the bottom of the list to get adopted. And then if they're male, that takes them all the way down again. And if they're African-American little boys, then they're at the very end, which was where my son was. At the end of the chain of getting adopted. So, yeah.
I would love to talk more about adoption for sure.
Yeah, I would love to too. There's some great families and kiddos that don't know that they are to be together yet.
Yes, so, definitely.
Getting out there. Well, I want you to let everyone know, how can they get Image Bearer? Where can they find you on the internet? How can they get your book and your merch?
Yes. Well, you can order Image Bearer. It's not on Amazon or anywhere like that yet. It's just on my website. So it's www.imagebearerbook.com. And if you go to my Instagram page, you'll be able to find it really easily in my bio. But my page on Instagram is Image Bearer Book. So kind of all the same thing. On Facebook, it's Image Bearer Book. So if you type in Image Bearer Book on any platform, you should be able to find me. And you can just order right through my website, and I'll ship it to you.
And I'm going to put it in my notes for everyone that's driving or listening to the podcast while you're taking a run. I'll type up the notes for the whole podcast, and you'll be able to, I'll put a link there also, so you can go ahead and click on the book and get the conversation started at your home and school and community. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks, Markeisha. I love talking to you. This was so
Yeah,
good.
it's been great. I am. We're going to be connecting after this because we have work to do now.
Yes.
Thank you so much again. Tell the kiddos we said hi, and
I
we'll
will
see
tell
you on the
Josiah and the
ground.
others.
Okay, thank
See you
you.
later.
Okay,
Bye.
bye-bye.